the next speaker is always blown my mind, and he's going to close today with our sessions. And not only is he a personal friend, I really think he's got something that I always learn from him. So he's a very humble soul, but he's also an extreme athlete, despite his appearance right now. But he is fun, hilarious, and I'm sure you'll have a wonderful time. So, Jepson Taylor, thank you for the privilege, and you have the floor.
Ooh, can you hear me okay? Let's see. Okay, can you see my screen? I'll assume you can see my screen. So jumping in, keeping up at the
We
rapid
can.
pace of, okay, perfect. Thank you. AI is moving so fast, and so I'm really excited to jump into this talk track with you. So my talking style is a little unique. I like to have fun. I like to simplify things, but I think you'll also see we're going to go really deep on some new concepts. And my goal with this is I want to leave all of you with new ideas. I'll be very happy if you spend the weekend with wheels turning in your mind, thinking about the future of healthcare. Um, so before I talk about AI, I like to talk about the brain, and a good way to introduce the brain is decisions. So the next photo I'm going to show you is taken right here at this pink dot. And just like surgeons, snowboarders have muscle memory. And I like this photo because it reminds me of making decisions. So this was me a few years ago, and I am stuck with making a decision. So I have the full fight or flight response happening right now. I've worn a heart rate monitor before when I'm in these situations, and I think the highest my heart has ever hit is 170 beats per minute at rest, just driven from anxiety, which is pretty impressive. It's difficult for me to get my heart rate that high normally. Um, so in this moment, it's interesting. You can't watch, there's no amount of YouTube videos that you can watch to allow you to make the right decision, going back to the muscle memory. And just like many of you, there's no amount of training that you could watch online. You have to learn in the OR and experiment. And one of the interesting things about humans, and a theme that I'll pull throughout this talk, is this concept of experience. So humans are remarkable because we can share experience. You can tell another surgeon, you can tell someone else what didn't work or what did work, and that is the whole point of this journal. Is we're sharing lessons along the way. And decisions, just like we have experience that goes through us as a human walking through life and learning, experience flows through the healthcare system. So we have massive amounts of data, so much data. And unfortunately, that data is not used. And not to sprinkle salt on a wound, but I think many of us were very disappointed with COVID and how humanity responded to that. And I think one of the most terrible quotes I heard during that time. For more context, by the way, when I was working at Data Robot, we were tasked with getting access to patient level data during the COVID crisis, and we were doing significant things. We were using our AI to optimize some of the COVID vaccine trials, and we were working very closely with HHS. And during that time, I listened to another human on the phone tell me that we have not had enough people die to understand the disease. And so what he was admitting over the phone was the thousands of people dying in New York going into freezers were useless. They were not helpful to me and my hospital network. And I'm hoping that's something that will change. And so now getting into the data, uh, every organization, every hospital network has three fundamental problems that they have today. They do not use most of their data to make better decisions. And I think that's something that many of us on this webinar are hoping to change. They have a lot of processes that are stale. They haven't changed for too long. And of course, there's consequence to change, right? You're not going to shoot from the hip and change a process on Monday. There's reasons we have process. Process can protect outcomes, protect patients, and they can protect you with your own uh, liability and risk. So having those, so processes are stale, and the knowledge workers leave. You can have brilliant people in an organization, and when they walk out the door and go to a different hospital network, there's no amount of documentation that can keep the knowledge that that human left with. And so AI, addresses all three. And we've already talked on this webinar about augmentation a lot. I really like that word because we don't need to automate things yet. We can augment the human. We can give surgeons and other individuals a heads-up display on potential problems or potential outcomes that they might not be aware of. Something I've had the pleasure of talking to Zane about is a human's inability to catch rare diseases. My dad's a doctor, and I grew up in the world where we celebrated the 1 in a million, the human that can catch a 1 in a million disease. And I'm really hoping we can move past that, because for AI, that is quite simple. I want to live in a world where AI is catching 1 in 100 million, where people are doing active research as they find it with all the patient level data. So I want to change gears a little bit, and I want to showcase how advanced we are with AI today. I'm going to have some fun doing this. So you're all familiar with Midjourney. I'm going to show you 4 images. This is some of the artwork that I've made. This is AI generated, of course. Thanks to the power of AI, you can make this in a few minutes. If you look at the field of depth, this is very impressive. This is shockingly impressive. For humans to do something like this several years ago would have cost tens and tens of thousands of dollars, and it would have required a team, because you would have to use technologies like Unreal Engine. Here's another one. But there's something going on here, and here's an image of a creature. So I told AI to imagine SpaceX as a creature, and it produced this. And I asked it to imagine McDonald's as a creature, and it produced this. And when people see this, they chuckle and they laugh. But there's actually something that's really profound going on. And this is a longer conversation, but I'll do my best to communicate it succinctly. This is showing off AI's comprehension of knowledge structures. The fact that it decided to use French fries for hair, or the associations that you see showing up, is really, really surprising. Because the deep learning systems that I worked with back in 2017, it could do some of this internally. It can find rough topics and different things, but we're seeing this at a level that feels much closer to a human expert if you were tasked with designing something like this. So I'm going to introduce a fairly advanced topic, and I hope I can communicate this well. So we're all familiar with ChatGPT. This is called zero shot. You put something in, you get something out. And I hope for people that are listening, I really hope that you are finding a reason to use it once a week. I would be delighted if you're finding a reason to use it every day. Please lean into these systems. They are much more competent than you realize. I forgot the numbers. I also teach at NYU, and I think one of the numbers that we mentioned was 40% of people have tried it once, meaning they don't use it regularly. And so if you've tried it and you've been disappointed, I promise you, you need to go back to these systems. This needs to be part of your regular toolkit. So zero shot, you put something in, you get something out. There's been a lot of buzz in the last 3 months around a new topic called agentic systems. These are some diagrams on the left, and this is where you do multiple calls. You could ask it to produce something, and then you could give it So I'm going to explain this succinctly for reflection. So reflection is, if I ask it to produce some code, or if I ask it to produce a summary for me, or maybe I'm working on a patent and I want it to come up with a template, the very next prompt, I can ask it to produce criticism, criticize everything that's wrong with the outcome of the first prompt. And then from that, I can roll it back again and again. And so this back and forth between the producer and the critic, anyone on this call can do that. You can experiment with that immediately, and you will get better results. You can also use these systems to drive tools. LLMs can drive inputs to other software tools. Here's an example to the right of planning. So next time you're in the car for an hour, you want to do a monologue and write that book that you haven't had time to write. You can take an hour-long monologue, you can put it into these systems, and you can have it plan a book. And the way it does this is it builds out a template, and it will begin to flesh out that template. So the template is the structure of the books. So think of that as being the chapters, the sections, the subsections, etc. The entire skeleton of the book will be built. That's the plan, and then it will flesh that out. You could do this for patents, you could do this for RFPs, you could do this for any long, lengthy PDF documents that you've worked on in the past. I do not recommend taking that and publishing it or sending it in an email. I always recommend proofing it. So you can imagine something like this. It allows you to do much more work. It allows you to move much faster. So these are popular. But there's something else that I've been working on for last year with this new company I'm associated with, and that is this concept of adaptation. So adaptation is where you use evolutionary systems with LLMs, with a population of LLMs to chase a goal. And I'm going to show you two examples, actually three. First one will be fun. It'll be related to generative AI images. And then the final two will be related to surgery. So let's suppose I announce I'm going to have an AI generated headshot competition. This is some of my work that you've seen. I think it's fairly impressive that many of you could make this as well in a few minutes with some training. So if I announce that I'm going to have an AI competition, I'm going to give away $100,000 to anyone that submits a good headshot. If you're being clever, you might think, well, I could send this competition into OpenAI or into Anthropic because they accept images, and I could just ask it to win. So in your mind, I want you to think how this will do. I'm going to use AI to win this competition. I don't want to spend hours making these headshots. I'll just have it win. And if I do that, it produces this. We all know, looking at this, you will not win with this output. This is a zero-shot example. The fascinating thing is humans become quite comfortable with new technologies. I would argue if I showed you this image 4 or 5 years ago, it would be breathtaking. Maybe someone would buy it for thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars. But now it is embarrassing. You would not submit this, and you would definitely not win this competition. But if I apply adaptive workflows, these are LLMs making calls over and over again, and they're evolving towards a goal. The goal is the competition. To win the competition, it produces this. This was actually made last year with Midjourney 5.2. These results are quite shocking to see something this good. Keep in mind, no human was involved with the creative ideation or the execution of this. This is AI chasing a goal. And if you zoom in, the eye is the window to the soul. I see a reflection. There is a room reflected in the eye. This is Dr. Kalpi in the OR. I'm just kidding, that last part's a joke. But the fact that there are rooms reflected in the eye, that is very impressive. Here's another one. This is another submission. There's actually something that's very profound that's going on in these submissions, and that is AI actually read the competition. These were text phrases from the competition. So the fact that there is light scattering across this woman's face in a very complicated design is very intentional. AI is literally hunting in its own cracks. It's chasing areas that it knows it is weak, and it is evolving to improve them. Here's another one. I'm a chemical engineer by trade. And so this one was the most impressive to me because of the light scattering, the multiphysics effects. You have the refractive index of the water. And if you zoom in, you have micro bubbles on the nose. And as a reminder to the audience, this is all AI generated. Just look at the light scattering from the hair. So this is AI doing adaptation, chasing a goal. So now let's bring this back into our world where we care about. I've got 5 slides left. So it's funny, when I went to graduate school, I've had a history of inventing new algorithms. And this was a paper that I published when I went to graduate school. And the innovation, which is circled in red, the box right there, this polylog, it was such a profound breakthrough at the time that it was required that my thesis be hidden from the public for 6 months after my graduation. My advisor required this. And the funny thing, when I came up with this insight for this innovation, which led to an order of magnitude improvement for this type of nanoparticle simulation, I felt quite proud. I was very proud of the human in the loop who had the innovation that came up with the solution. I'm going to show you in a few. The light bulb, I have grown out of love of the light bulb. So this image, it represents a computer science PhD accomplished in a few minutes. I'm going to explain what you're looking at. And I apologize for custom plots. I know it's quite bad. You're not supposed to do that, but I think it'll be simple to explain. Every part of this, every that is red, every vertical bar that is red, is a algorithm that was invented by a human. So think of a paper, first author. I would say it's PhD equivalent research. Every bar that's not red is an algorithm that was invented by AI without a human, completely from the ground up. Shorter is better. These are optimizers. The only thing stopping me from going around the world to the right is compute. And so if you are going to get your PhD in optimizers right now, I don't know what you're going to do compared to what these new systems can do. So now something that we're all familiar with, the STS risk calculator. Behind the scenes, it is using a machine learning model. And these fields that you fill in, these are structured inputs. Nick talked about features. AI models, you have inputs and outputs. So this is a structured model, and there is a model with a name underneath the hood that has been trained on historical data to predict the outcomes, and you're using the outcomes of that model. This is an example of machine learning. You have, going back to the optimizer example, for every great algorithm, there's often a human or a group of humans around that algorithm's invention. These are a few I pulled out for random forest, for vector machine, linear regression. All of these models could be used for the STS risk calculator behind the scenes. What we see now within the last few months is AI is inventing new machine learning algorithms that are beating what the humans are doing. So in this very aggressive benchmark on the right, there are over 1 million synthetic data sets that are being benchmarked. Higher is more competitive, and the red lines again are human. And what we see is currently we are looking at no human algorithm can outperform the synthetic algorithms consistently on these real world benchmarks that are included in the synthetic data set. So what that means is we're quickly moving into a future where every machine learning algorithm that humans are using to deliver outcomes will be written by AI, and it really is a nonsensical world, or it feels nonsensical. Because if I told you for the task that you want me to do tomorrow, I will invent an algorithm in the morning, that feels moronic. It doesn't feel safe, and it feels ridiculous. That's something that would take me years to do. So this is the final slide. Our ability to innovate. Let's see. Oh, mind blow. Okay. So the final slide, I want to pull this really back into your court. So let's talk about the cost of failure. So if I come up with a bad algorithm idea for my PhD research, and my advisor approves it, let's say it's not a bad idea. My advisor approves of this. I work very hard for the next 9 months. And these are true stories. These are lots of stories that people will relate to. Let's say I hit a wall. It's not my fault. We actually did hit a wall. This idea did not work. That's how innovation works. What is the cost of failure? It's incredibly painful. I spent 9 months. I'm now quite rattled. I'm concerned about graduating. I need to go back to the drawing board with my advisor. This happens all the time. Now compare the cost of failure to AI. AI can invent, I think right now we're running at 1,000 new novel algorithms per day. Eventually that could be millions. The cost of failure is nothing. It is pennies. And now let's take this over to surgery. You come up with a novel idea. You are working on something. You're doing research. You are leaving your process because you are a researcher. The cost of failure is not zero. The cost of failure is extreme, but it's something that we deal with, that you deal with in the spirit of innovation. Something that will not happen, I don't think it will happen this decade. We've all been talking about the digital twin, but the ultimate digital twin is actually having AI induce surgeries without you digitally. So imagine while you all sleep tonight, having AI do 10 billion heart surgeries on a variety of humans. You want them to be very, and this is my final slide. You want the humans to have all sorts of disorders, all sorts of differences, all sorts of complications. Robotic surgery is happening over and over and over. And it can even evolve. It can add the wrist that was mentioned in the robotic tool. It can experiment. And these surgeries happening in this digital space, this is quite good because the cost of failure is small. It is now pennies and no human lives are lost. And those lessons come back to the surgeons where they're rolled up in topics and suggestions on key innovations for the real world. So this is something we are nowhere close. This is kind of the final horizon, but this is something that I think we will see in our lifetime, digital surgeries, and I will stop there. Thanks, Zane.
Well, Ben, I need to take a breath because you blew my mind again. I think that was really cool. So a couple of things, right? So you and I have spoken about biological systems, and various biological systems humans have adapted to become forms of machine learning or AI, particle swarm, for example, learning from bees and particles. So talk to me about biological systems in robotic heart surgery. Talk to me about meta heuristics and agentic workflows from what Nick was talking about earlier. But then after digesting all the data from these 4 or 5 talks and interactions, where do you see self-adapting learning systems push? I know digital twinning is probably going to happen near, and everybody on the faculty, including Andrew, whose flight is delayed. It must be a Boeing. Um, I'm hoping that we will be able to, or you'll be able to tell us a little bit about what you think is the future of robotic heart surgery, not in a year, tomorrow, and how can it
Mm.
be practically applied today?
So I think the practical thing today is a lot of algorithms that are in use by healthcare providers are insufficient because they lack the expertise. And that's one of the things that Nick was talking about before. We have AI expertise and you have domain expertise. We have to work together. And I think if we did a full audit of a lot of the models that are currently being used, we would be disappointed. And so figuring out that's something that could happen immediately. How do we level those models up? How do we make sure? Because it's not just about model accuracy, it's also about model defensibility, the risks associated, model interpretability, and a lot of that stuff should be improved immediately. And I think we have a path to do that. Um, one of the things that I think you're hinting on with your first question, there's actually some beautiful synergy here between innovation and healthcare, because these inspirations for these newer systems to come from healthcare. They not only do they come from evolution or genetics, but some of the insights even come from the real world. Levy flights distributions, how sharks do hunting. There's a long list of things that we've observed in the real world that end up being used on the innovation front on these digital systems. But yeah, steer me into more questions or pushback on anything I've said. Right now, I think for the next year, we are definitely going to be living in the biologically inspired innovation territory. But I think we could move past that. Because right now the LLMs are being fairly aggressive on they're hunting for their own inspiration, which I think is quite fun. So you and I can give inspiration, but they're hunting for their own inspiration in corners of
So
the knowledge
yeah,
library.
so you're probably one of the very few genetic coders in the country, if not the world. So you've created this adaptive learning system, which is mind-blowing. And you kind of speak the same language as us, which is why we're good friends. So when you insert a mutation, how do you verify and validate that you're not going to kill the patient?
So it's funny because people talk about hallucinations being bad. I actually quite like them. So during so during the innovation phase, I want more hallucinations. And then the way you protect the patient, it all comes down to the benchmarking in the validation. So this is where the human is heavily involved. So I don't want to give the impression that these computers are evolving algorithms and novel code all the way into the OR, all the way into the patient, and then we're reacting um, tonight because we have no idea what was done. That's not actually what would happen. But during the innovation phase, it is pretty chaotic because bad ideas are cheap. There's more hallucination than you realize. But when it actually goes through the vetting process, this is very transparent. The model that comes out of the end, it comes out the other side, it can be reviewed by a human. A human expert can look at all the code. But more importantly, it goes through very robust testing. I would argue more robust testing than human innovators have ever done. We're talking orders of magnitude more benchmarking. So I actually, I'll take maybe a more extreme point of view. I think soon it will be irresponsible to use algorithms that have been invented by humans because they will lack the safety, they will lack the efficiency. the rubrics that we care about will be insufficient. But it doesn't mean we're giving up. It doesn't mean we're turning over the reins to AI. It means we're just leveling up.
Well, yet again, Jepson, you have blown my mind. Great talk, lovely pictures. And I'm going to open up to the rest of the faculty if they wanted to ask any questions or bring up anything that's burning. And then we'll open up to the audience for participation. And I know we're running late, but thank you for your patience with us. Andrew, your Boeing flight is delayed.
I hope it's not Boeing, but that's another discussion. Thank you for letting me get my question in, because it looks like I'm actually finally about to leave. I've often felt that, much like the radiation oncologists that have a physicist on staff for every treatment, separate, that we're going to start to need an artificial intelligence expert in each department. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts on how feasible that was and how realistic that was, because it seems like, that we're approaching that a strong need for that at some point.
So it's already happening, Andrew. Nick King has walks with the same footsteps in my operating room and preoperative clinics and post-operative clinics. And actually, I introduce him as Dr. King, actually, in in the clinic. But he, sees things and sees how data flows in a completely different spectacle to us, and also sees how to apply some of those things because we can speak the same language. And that was really wonderful. I mean, I love having, so I think it's not a part of moving there. It's essential. And one of the other things is Nick and Ben are not only confidants but also good friends, but also we are sitting on the similar clinical AI governance committees. And so this is for adoption of AI and building risk assessments for industry players that are coming to healthcare's door to allow us to use things safely. And they have different lenses. And so I think it's absolutely critical, not just, it's nice to have. It's critical in this world to have and speak the same language. And so I think it's absolutely imperative that happens. So
I just think it needs to be full time. I think it needs to be full time.
Agreed. Yep.
Yeah.
Nick, do you have a comment to that?
Yeah, look, I mean, the further we go down the rabbit hole here, the more we keep finding new things to focus on. And every time I talk to a different specialist, we walk away with 4 or 5 new areas to discover. So I just think the opportunity for folks like yourself just to share insights, intuitive views of it'd be interesting if, and sharing those with folks like Ben and I, we often starts us thinking oh, that's that data, how do we do that? And so we sort of start thinking about how to get that data into your hands. But it's those intuitions you have and insights you have that allow us to step that forward. And so something that sort of goes both ways is this approach allows you to kind of unleash a lot of that creativity where you've got ideas you've come across before and it's been hard to get access to data. Someone like Ben can go through and rapidly iterate through this stuff very quickly. And so that puts you in a position to, focus on developing the protocols and insights without having to become an expert in data science. And it's up to folks like us to explain how we got there and view it and validate that approach. So I think it's a huge opportunity.
Andrew?
Yeah, Zane, so sorry, but Zoe will beat me up if I don't ask and remind everybody to please consider our journal for your submissions. Our website is AISJOURNAL.net, AISjournal.net. We accept submissions from clinicians, but also from computer scientists. Obviously, when they're together, we like it even more. With that, I'm going to sign off and stop bothering you, Zane. Amazing talk. We'll be in touch in the next couple of weeks with that device I want to tell you about.
Nice to see you. Have a safe flight.
You too.